We're going to talk about all things Part Z and whether it's the key to embodied carbon reduction. We've got a great panel who are going to introduce themselves in a second. We'll leave some time for questions. I suspect there's going to be some healthy debate and probably quite a few questions on this one. So we'll try and leave a bit of time at the end for questions, which we didn't do very well this morning. And I think we'll get started. So, Simon, do you want to first of all introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody, good afternoon. So my name is Simon Corbey. I'm CEO at the Alliance for Sustainable Building Products. We're a sustainability organisation and our focus is really on products. We are a membership organisation. We have 170 members and One Click is one of those members. And we're mission driven and our mission is to enable a low carbon and healthy built environment, and bringing those things together I think is really key. So so we aim to inspire. We do lots of webinars and free newsletter. So do sign up to our free newsletter and have a look at what we do and get involved. Thank you.
Yeah, Charlie Law. I'm Sustainability Director at Timber Development UK. So we're the trade association for the timber industry. So we represent members from the sawmills at one end, all the way through the supply chain, so merchants, fabricators, all the way through to architects and engineers at the other end. So, and we basically provide all the technical information. On our website, we've got about 1,500 members, most of them being designers, to be fair. And like I say, we provide all the technical information for those groups.
James?
Thank you. And I'm James Cadman. I work for Supply Chain Sustainability School. I'm sure you might have heard of us. We've got, spitting some stats here, we've got 230 partner organisations who kind of fund and support the organisation because it's free at the point of use in terms of learning and education around the whole of sustainability and beyond. It's been going now for about 13 years. It's free to join as a member and get access to learning materials, webinars, newsletters, similar kind of approach. And it's about getting that message out there. It's trying to break down those barriers of, I don't know what it is, I don't know where to go and find information.
Great, thank you. Maybe just to start, a very quick show of hands on, I guess, awareness of Part Z. So put your hand up if you would consider yourself an expert on Part Z. 4, that's good. You know a bit about it, but not loads? Okay, and you don't really know anything about it at all? Okay. Hands down. Okay, great. So pretty mixed, which is appropriate for our first question, which is you, Simon. So do you just want to take us through kind of what Part Z is?
Yeah, so it's a public-facing campaign to really try and show the government that we, the industry, are ready for legislation when it comes to embodied carbon. So we've been trying to convince government that we must legislate for embodied carbon. Of course, if you look around Europe and if you look around America, streets ahead of us, and they've already legislated. So it's a campaign really to try and show the government that we are able and willing and ready. So I would urge you to have a look at it, and you can sign up and support it. But we'll cover that in a bit more detail. So about 1 in 10 tons of carbon is associated with embodied carbon. So 10% of our carbon is not regulated. So we've been regulating for operational carbon since 1978, I think. So nearly 50 years. So, you know, and we're still arguing about exactly how we model it. So, you know, if you'd like a nerdy discussion around that, happy to do that, but another time. So the fact that we're, you know, there is not a complete certainty about numbers and life cycle analysis, and particularly as we're looking forwards, is not really a reason to regulate. We think we're ready, and certainly around Europe, they've been at it a while now. Yeah.
So you might not have been here at the very start, but one of the top 3 challenges that people here responded was a general focus on operational carbon rather than embodied among kind of like the public and the industry at large.
Yep.
So like exactly what you've just said, basically. So thanks for that. We'll move on to our next question, which is for you, Charlie, which is really around how Part Z might reshape the priorities of the construction industry? What kinds of things do you think we might see as we move towards Part Z being
Yeah,
implemented?
yeah. Well, as Simon says, obviously, we've been regulating and measuring operational carbon for a long, long time. It might not have been called that in the early days, obviously, but we've been measuring it for a long, long time. And that has brought down those emissions significantly to the point where embodied carbon is now your primary carbon emitter for the life cycle of a building in most cases, because we've reduced that operational energy down significantly. So obviously, what we want to see is, firstly, raise awareness of the embodied carbon in the built environment. I think there's a lot of people don't necessarily realise that embodied carbon is now such a big part of the life cycle emissions of a building. So firstly, it's raising awareness of that point first off. And then, obviously, how do we start to bring that down? And part of the Part Z sort of campaign, because it's not nothing legislation. We call it Part Z, but it's actually a campaign. There's no sort of draft Part Z out there at the moment, apart from the one that the campaign team have put together. So Will Arnold and people like that, if you know them. So they've put this Part Z together. It looks like a Part Z document and shows how it might work. And part of that going forward is actually then to start setting limits for the embodied carbon per square metre of certain types of building. So that then starts to then bring that embodied carbon down, and we need to start being clever then how we can then how we can actually continue to build our buildings, but at the same time lower that embodied carbon. So that's the key bit. So it's about awareness first, and then trying to see how we can reduce that by using possibly different building methods. Do we big campaigns around at the moment around not demolishing buildings and refurbishing? That would be a massive carbon saving on a lot of projects. If we don't demolish the existing building and refurbish it, that's a massive carbon saving straight away. Do we need to start looking at different materials? Obviously we're from the timber industry, so I'm going to say, look, use timber because it's a low carbon product. We've got the steel industry here, they're going to be saying, no, use low carbon steel. So there's going to be a lot of work going on there to try and reduce those material emissions in the products because of this type of legislation and changes to the way things are done. So I think, I don't know if Simon and
absolutely.
Anything else to add to that?
Essentially I agree with that. There's the issue, which is probably the follow-on question, the corollary, is that awareness and knowledge. That's where I'd pick up from, and that's where the supply chain school is at. There's a huge tail, as we all know, in the supply chain of installers, fitters, contractors, and it's that massive group of organisations that are looking at this saying, we need to know more about this because we know it's coming, and in some cases it's already here. And that's where the biggest effort is going to be focused, in my view, from what the supply chain school sees. I listened to the presentations this morning. They're all great presentations, but there's such a myriad of acronyms in there that all need unpacking and explaining and describing as to what that actually means on the ground for the organisations that need to basically provide those materials and confidently know what that information is telling them and ultimately their customer. So I think we're certainly moving in the right direction, but there's still a way to go to get the market included.
So moving from specialists to people who are able to understand it at a more general level and helping them to do that, which is what.
It's got to be something that becomes part of every day. At the moment, it isn't for many of the supplier organisations and the contractors. Importantly, it's not just the manufacturers; it's the contractors. Importantly, who have those packages. It's not part of everyday way of doing projects. It's there, but it's not ingrained in the way that many other things are.
So what specifically needs to change in order to make that happen? So if we pick certain operators along that value chain, maybe we pick one each, I don't know. Maybe you start, James. So since you've been talking, so whether it's manufacturers or someone else in the supply chain, what kinds of things beyond awareness specifically do they need to do to start to be ready for if Part Z does become a legislatory reality?
I think there's a pinch point. We've done a lot of work, particularly with house builders, and obviously there's an array of different construction sectors that we're talking about today. But in house building, there seems to be a bit of a pinch point. You've got the volumetric house builders, you've got the more specialised ones. You've got lots of material suppliers who know their stuff in terms of EPDs. Let's just call it EPDs as a shorthand for what we're on about. But there's that pinch point, if you imagine an hourglass, of the smaller regional contractors who actually install the stuff. And it's them who are approached for the information about, we've got a package of works, go out and secure the materials yourselves within a budget envelope, or make sure that it's sustainable. They're the ones in the middle going, we know about EPDs and we've heard about this, but how do we give ourselves the confidence that we're sourcing the right kind of material to then install for that end client. And we shouldn't lose sight of carbon as well. There's a whole bunch of other stuff there with social value and modern slavery and all the other stuff in ESG. So they're in that pinch point. I think, yes, awareness, education is clearly at the core of that. But then you need to take them beyond that. How do they get the competence? Was it the 7 steps of redemption? It's that kind of mindset. Awareness is the first one, and that's great. You're on the ladder, but then you need to get competence over time. And that's the journey that we see those contractors getting on.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, a lot of our members are, well, we spread across the supply chain, so lots of different things there. I totally agree with that. We need obviously education of the contractors that are putting the actual building together on site and bringing all that, the EPDs or environmental product declarations. If hopefully most people know that's what that means. Environmental product declarations hold that carbon data as well as a lot of other environmental impact data, as you say. So it's making sure that they understand those EPDs and when an EPD is required and when an EPD might not be required. Because speaking to one of the delegates here today who manufactures wall panels, so prefabricated housing systems. So they'll manufacture a wall panel that comes in, closed panel timber frame, so it's got timber in it, it's got OSB, it might have some insulation in it. Does he need it? He's saying, do I need an EPD for every one of the panels that I bring in? I said, well, no, that's something you need to bring together. Your supplier, who supplies you with a piece of timber and the piece of OSB and the insulation, will need to provide you with an EPD. There then needs to be a program that brings that together at some point that then you can pass on to your principal contractor, say, right, this is, we've done our bit, our off-site prefabrication, here's the measurements for that you can then build into your whole life carbon assessment for your project. So there's things, understanding there that it's not just going to be an EPD for everything, and it's not possible because, different variations. You've then obviously got the manufacturers of the products, which will need to understand those environmental product declarations to start issuing those, and there's a lot out there. Generally, though, the bigger suppliers, people like Saint-Gobain, have got a lot of EPDs out there. You've got some of the steel guys, concrete guys have all got their EPDs. But when you start getting down to the smaller products, how many of them do we need? And that's where we need to come to how much do we actually need to measure. Are we going to measure 100% of the products in a building? My answer to that is no. We need to concentrate on the 80% of materials and products that probably generate 99% of the carbon emissions. So that last 1%, what's the point of chasing 30 or 40 different contractors that are generating 1%? Let's make an allowance for that and concentrate on the big emitters. So, your frame, your facade, your floors, your substructure, maybe your internal walling, maybe some of your finishes, key ones. That's the sort of thing we need to decide. And that's where we need some study projects to see, do measure everything to a point and say, right, these are the bits that we need to concentrate on. Forget about those bits. They're less than 1% of the emissions. Let's concentrate on these 20 or 30 items and make sure that everyone that's supplying those items has EPDs. And then obviously once we've got that data, people understand it, you've then got the designers, obviously they'll need that training to be able to understand how they bring all those together and start modelling. It's going to be a matter of, well, if we put that in, we might have to lose something elsewhere, because we do have to hit these carbon targets, in my view. If we don't, we go past our 2-degree global warming. I think we're already going to go past 1.5. I think that's gone. But if we can try and keep it to 2 degrees, if we don't, we've got big problems. We really have. So we've really got to hit these carbon targets as best we can.
Great.
Yeah, so our sister organisation is one called the Passive House Trust. I'm hoping that that's something maybe that you're familiar with. So Passive House is an incredibly low energy standard, which will suddenly take people out of any sort of fuel poverty. And so there's more and more passive house buildings. You would have seen perhaps a press release by Barratt. So in principle, they're going to be building every building in London to passive house standards. And they have been measuring their embodied carbon targets for over 10 years. So if you look at Part Z, you will see that there's a whole range of organisations, clients, house builders, banks, NatWest, who have supported Part Z, and they've got their sort of a paragraph that describes why they are supporting Part Z. So if you have a look at the website, you won't see everybody that's supported and signed up to it, but that's going to change. So the idea is we have a sort of target in our mind of about 2,000 organisations. So what I'd like you to do is to support it yourself. You can do that, via the website, but also push it out to your colleagues that you're working with. And one more thing. So at the moment, really, embodied carbon calculations are really driven by clients. So, I mean, it's fine a designer will say, yeah, we can do these things, but it's the client really that's demanding it at the moment. But it tends to be the clients, it's the big clients, the Crown Estates, British Land, these types of folk, and perhaps not quite so much the sort of clients in Manchester or Birmingham that are developing. And really, at the moment, there's just no incentive for them to do so, really, apart from a bit of PR and a bit of press. But, I do think that if we can legislate, I think it will really transform everything that we do on a day-to-day basis. I really do think that.
Just to add to that, obviously, OneClick, we operate globally. We operate in geographies where equivalent legislation's in place, and to say probably the most obvious comment of the day, like where that legislation exists, a lot more people do LCAs, because they have to. So it would be great if we could get to that place over here as well.
Some stats, actually.
It would. I'm sure we can.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
And I should say as well that the links and the sign-ups that you talked about, we're going to share all of that information afterwards as well. So no need to sort of make notes or ask questions on that. Okay, so some basics there around Part Z and kind of like what it means, I guess, for different parts of the supply chain and the industry. It's been around for a while as an entity, as an idea, as a campaign. It started in the previous government, I think, and now obviously we have a different one. Can you just, I think, Simon, this is a question for you. Can you just bring us up to speed on where things are at in terms of the campaign and, I guess, where you see it going in the short to medium term?
Yeah, so it's been around for a few years, and as soon as the Labour government came in, Part Z wrote to them and said, look, come on, let's move ahead on this. And we're trying to sort of re-energise the campaign, really, and trying to get up to these sort of 2,000 people, because there is, believe it or not, an embodied carbon department within MCHLG. Has anybody had any dealings with them? No, there we are. Okay, so we've got to know them quite well. And this government is a bit more open door, and you can have a conversation with them, and you can invite them to conferences like this, and they will come. They might look a bit awkward as there's a pile of people descending upon them, wanting to talk to them. But so we have asked them, what the hesitation is really around the legislation piece, and so it's sort of two or threefold. So one is the cost. So how much is it going to cost? And there's a report being done by AECOM. Anyone from AECOM here? No? Okay. Oh, okay. Brilliant. All right. So maybe you could tell us a bit more, but there's a report with government, and DESNES, MCHLG, are going through AECOM's report line by line, I think. And okay. So I'm told it's due imminently, whatever that means. And at that stage, it'll be a sort of like a look at the industry. And so there is a concern. They don't want any barriers to this sort of development. They want 1.5 million new homes. They want lots of development, and they don't want barriers to that. And so they see the possible cost issues associated with embodied carbon as being a possible area of concern. So we're working with OneClick to try and sort of talk them down from that concern. And then the other concern, you'll be all interested to know, is that they don't think that there are enough practitioners who are able and capable of doing complicated whole life carbon assessments. And so I would like to suggest that there are plenty of folk who are able and willing to do these types of assessments. You're all in the room here today. And so, that's the other part really that the government is concerned about. So if anybody's got any thoughts on those or comments on those they want to feed to me, I sort of feel that we have a good conduit to MCHLG, and very happy to take any feedback you may offer. and pass it on.
Thank you for that.
So just to add to where we are with some of that, though, I think on the cost side of things, there has been some work going on in the background through things like the Future Homes Hub. Yep. So the Future Homes Hub have developed a whole life carbon tool to help the mass house builders mainly, but any really house builder could use that tool, and it's basically got some standard build-ups within that tool. So you can go in there and say, right, we're going to use this type, we're going to use brick, and we're going to use a timber frame, and we're going to put a tile pitch roof on it, etc. And it will spit out some numbers based on standard data, so they can get an idea of what that embodied carbon assessment of that particular building might be, and they can then start to play around with it. And that's been developed by Future Homes Hub with the major house builders to try and come up with a tool that's very simple to use, that gets away from, as you say, that how difficult is it to do one of these assessments, and that sort of tries to lower that skill level to someone that just knows what quantities of materials they're using. So it could be the procurement person, or it could be someone in their design department that knows what quantities of building going in there. So it brings it down and can produce an assessment in a few hours. So that brings that cost right down. So it can be done. Obviously, we've got things like one-click LCA that do a similar thing. I
was going to say.
But that's probably then the next level where you then start to say, right, we've got these materials going in, this material going in. The Future Homes Hub one is very much an initial assessment tool, and then you start to build on that. Once you've got your design sort of partially developed, you can then start to go into a bit more detail on it with something like one-click LCA. So there are things happening. I think that cost, I think they're starting to be a bit more reassured that cost isn't as high as they thought it might be, and that we can quite easily train up people to a certain level. And like I say, you've then got tools like one-click, which are starting to come in there, which are standardised tools. And I see that there will be a need for approved assessment tools to do these assessments. And for different types of building, you might have lots of different tools, and some you might only have one or two, but there will be approved assessment tools out there. And obviously things like AI and stuff like that are starting to come in. I know you're starting to use AI in some of your tools to make that process easier. Have we included everything? Is there something missing? Oh, you've forgotten the substructure. Oh dear, I'll put that in. Those sorts of things that the AI tools are starting to be able to do now. So I think that is starting to come down.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, the other bit of work we did manage to get it in the timber and construction roadmap as well. So there's a specific requirement in there for the government to look at embodied carbon assessment in the timber and construction roadmap that they signed off at the beginning of March. So it does say there they do have to look at it. It doesn't say they're going to implement it, but it does say they're going to look to introduce whole life carbon assessments.
Can I just give a small counterpoint to that? Totally agree with all that. And I'm just going to, again, I'm kind of waving the flag for the small person out there, because there's 50,000 of them, organisations, not people. We heard from Jasper this morning about you've got life cycle and greenhouse gas. So we've got a lot of small organisations who are going, I need to be doing all this on a product or a building or an asset level for my client, because I want to know that for that thing that I'm building for them. They also want to know what it is on my company level, because they want to get science-based targets. Now, we know in this room that it's largely the same data, it's just how you slice and dice it in simplistic terms. But they see it as kind of two big things to do. So it's how we can help them understand that it's often there's a common root to a lot of that data. It's just how you package it up, whether it's in literally that package, that contractual package for that client, or whether it's your company for the last 12 months for SBT. So I think there's helping unpick that for a lot of organisations out there who are going, holy moly, that's two things I need to do now.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's a lot of it's the same data
that
you're needing. You're measuring it either for your EPD or you're getting the EPD for your Scope 3 emissions.
Exactly.
So we've sort of got into the next question quite nicely there. So I'll segue us in, which is, I suppose if we look forward to a point in the near future where Part Z becomes legislation, who knows when that'll be? Hopefully soon. We don't know. What are some of the, you kind of mentioned cost as an objection that gets raised, like level of capability, level of awareness, education. What are some of the practical challenges or risks that we as a wider community or the wider community need to overcome in order to actually be ready for whenever that happens? Let's start with you and then we'll work down.
Go the other way. The thing we hear in the school time and time again is that EPDs are great, but how do I read them? I think someone said that this morning. 20, 30 pages of lots of numbers and graphs and acronyms I don't understand. If there was an EPD light, I know EPDs are quite short, really, compared to an LCA. I've done enough of those myself. But an EPD light that is literally 1 or 2 pages that says, this is the key information you need for your client when they put that tender question to you about the embodied carbon of your material. What's the number, and what does it include? Which of the modules does it include from A to D? And why does it include it? So very simple layperson's language on 1 or 2 pages. And then you've got the full EPD behind it if you need to do with the other stuff on all the other ecotox properties. Fine, but most people focus on GWP. So do that, and then most people, the procurement people, the commercial people go, I can wrap my head around that bit, and I can trust in the number as well. So therefore, when I put my tender in, I feel confident behind it.
Right, so make it simple. That's one. Or
Yeah.
Simpler.
Shorter.
What else?
The EPDs, I think, are the big block on some of this. I think we do need the materials manufacturers, commodity producers to produce EPDs for their particular products. So there's some out there that are more sort of for a range of products, but we need to start honing in on those. And for the timber industry in particular, how the biogenic carbon is dealt with is a big issue in those EPDs. I see a lot of EPDs because we produce some average data for the timber industry each year, based on all the EPDs that are out there for timber products, and we sort of see where they come from and who's manufacturing them, and then we compile this weighted average data for each timber product based on the consumption in the UK. And going through that data, I see a lot of mistakes on how the biogenic carbon is dealt with. So, that needs to be dealt with by the people that are producing them, and that's whether that's, one-click LCA, making sure that that's highlighted in the training that you give. We're just doing some work with the UK timber industry, and the software they're using, it's not one-click, doesn't seem to deal with the biogenic carbon correctly, and we've had to manually adjust the figures to deal with the biogenic carbon. So there's still a lot of misunderstanding on how certain things are done within EPDs.
Simple answer to that problem.
Yeah, use one-click LCA, exactly.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I think EPDs and the manufacturers getting their head around them, and their consultants even getting ahead, because it's still quite new. I think some of this is still,
and it's complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's not easy
for lay people, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just a couple of quick things. So we've done lots of work around EPD. So we've been working with our board member, Jane Anderson. You may know Jane. She's probably the UK's brightest sort of LCA guru. I hope you don't mind me saying that.
Absolutely.
But her PhD looked at the various tools that were available on the market and made some comparisons. So her website is Construction LCA. So she does a newsletter, so sign up to that. If you really want to read her PhD, I think it is there. It's quite hard going, but it's quite an interesting assessment, really. So that's what I would say. So we've been doing things like, the 10 things you need to look out for on an EPD. So we've got lots of free webinars, lots of free briefing papers on our website. So just put in EPD in the search engine on our resources page, and you'll come back with a load of free stuff. So, we're quite often dealing with designers, who really don't like spreadsheets. They want to talk about colour. So they sort of tend to, and I get a bit like that. I get a bit of a panic attack when I see a very complicated spreadsheet. So, yeah, we all know to sort of keep it simple, really. So, and then we have a couple of small, quite a lot of small and very sort of start-up-y innovation-type companies that are making construction products to sell into the industry, and most of them have understood that actually an EPD is a good investment, because it may cost about, £7,000 to £10,000, depending on how complex your product is, but it should be valid for 5 years now. So if you break that down over an annual period, that's actually not too much. So when you think about your sort of marketing and comms budget, actually it makes a great deal of sense. And if you want to say anything about your product, if you want to, proffer a green claim, having an EPD means you can make that claim. You can say that, and you can't be challenged on it because there it is in third-party verified. So most of the smaller companies now are starting to understand that an EPD is a good investment for their product. So, you'll find that there are more and more and more coming on. But, you know, it's that sort of chicken and egg until you demand them from product suppliers or designers demand them, then, you know, so it is that, it's that chicken and egg thing, yeah. Okay,
believe it or not, we're starting to run out of time a little bit, so we'll just quickly end with a, I think you might have just done it actually for you, but feel free to add some more, kind of a bit of a call to action. So from your perspective in the different parts of the industry that you occupy, what would you like to see from this room, from the industry generally, to get us to that goal of making Part Z not a campaign but a reality legislation-wise?
Yeah, I think it's sort of multi-pronged process really. So, so next week we've got a free webinar to learn from the Danish experience. So in Denmark they've got a public-facing campaign very much like Part Z, and it's now pushed through and it's been legislated for. So from the 1st of January, embodied carbon targets became mandatory. So what we're going to do is find out from them about that process, and then, you know, what impact has that had on the construction industry. So that's a free webinar next Tuesday at lunchtime. So I think learning from other countries is quite useful. I mean, we looked at France. So the amount of bio-based products that they tend to use in France is so much more than we use in the UK. So we work with all the natural fibre insulation guys here in the UK, and in the UK, that part of the market is less than 1%. But in France and in Germany, it's 10%. So, you know, the growth is absolutely enormous. So, and I would just urge you, please, even if you're a standalone one-off company, you're on your own, please sign up to Part Z, support it, and try and get your colleagues to do exactly the same. We want to try and get to 2,000 folks so that we can go back to government and say, look, you know, we think the industry is ready for this. And that's probably the easiest way I can think of turning it into reality.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, I think, sign up to Part Z, show your commitment. But secondly, just start doing some assessments. You know, start simple, pick off the big items and start to understand what the embodied carbon is within the projects that you're working on. There are lots of tools out there, you know, one click do one. There's a number of others out there that some are freely available, some are paid for, depends on, you know, how detailed you want to go into that assessment. You know, so start maybe with some of the smaller ones and just start doing them. I think that's the key, and start to understand it is the key thing for me.
Love it. James?
I can really only echo that basically. I was going to rob your chicken and egg analogy and smash the egg and start making an omelette.
Oh, really?
Just get on with it, you know, even if you can't do your own EPD, start with some of the free data that's been alluded to. So you've got an idea of what the number is. Is it roughly this big? And as you get more experience and more budget, you can refine that number to what it actually is. But don't sit there and wait for that kind of halcyon of the perfect EPD. There's other stuff you can do before that, before you get to that kind of that end point. Yeah, don't hang around. Don't wait to be asked.
There's plenty out there at the moment, plenty of information on the larger stuff to start the assessments. Yes, the smaller little bits aren't maybe there yet, but there's plenty of EPDs out there for concrete, steel, timber. So start measuring those bits first, and then...
There's 300,000 of them on the WLCA database.
Exactly.
And there's also, I mean, got a lot of it here. There's a lot of free expertise and training and places to get the knowledge that you need to get going.